I see Maria in there. And just shrink that. Oh, you're so good. Okay, fantastic. I imagine. I imagine so. Okay, let me put this. Just space bar.
Yeah, everyone's, yeah.
Okay. We'll start exactly at 9 o'clock, so those that are going to be joining us on Teams can have a few minutes. So hang tight with us. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you so much. I also
Yeah.
walk around. Yeah. So if you guys feel like you need to just grab the mic, it's totally fine.
Yeah. And
just make sure to turn this one off.
Yeah. And with the mic though, they should be able to hear us.
Yes, they should. Yeah. And I have Maria, she's monitoring the chat.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we're good. So I've known you for a long time, but Justin and I have not met in person. Yeah. Oh, really?
But yeah.
It's always been on Teams.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's been like 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
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 So our first time meeting.
Yeah.
And first time meeting. How long have you been at YES?
Well, I've been at YES. This is my third year. I completed my internship with them.
Nice. Nice, nice. Sorry, everyone. We're waiting for 9 o'clock to hit because we do have folks joining in on Teams. Thank you for coming, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you. Technology works so fine. And then, well, you're so much better.
I just test things. If it doesn't work, I just keep going. So
I get so freaked out. Like, all right, it's 9 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. All right. Good morning, everybody. This session right now that starts at 9 o'clock, we actually, although we're in person here with our secondary counselors, we actually have some of our impact counselors, welcome, our social workers and our elementary counselors that are joining us for this training as well via Teams. It is being recorded. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our special guests from Youth Eastside Services, Justin and Giselle, cover their content first. And then after that, we'll turn off the recording and then allow for some time to do some Q&A if they have some time available. I know Justin has a hard stop at 9:40. So we'll go ahead and get started. I am very pleased and happy to have both Justin and Giselle here today to share with us about how we can be supporting our LGBTQ youth, especially in this very, interesting, I guess might be a word, landscape, political landscape. And so they're here to help us. And I'm just going to hand it over to them and let them introduce themselves and we'll go from there.
Great, thank you. I'm a mover, so I'm trying to stick behind here so people can see us and hear us as well. So bear with me if I start to get some fancy feet here. My name's Justin Daignault. I use any pronouns, and I'm a clinical supervisor. I see some clients still. I run our intern program as well. So some of you may have had emails with me and Christine Eccleston from Eastside Services about interns in schools and stuff like that. So I may not have met some of you, but you may have seen my name or I may have seen your name over the last few years. But yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name's Giselle, she, her pronouns, and I'm a youth and family therapist over at YES, as well as the Be Glad coordinator.
Yeah, and I was coordinating the Be Glad program. We'll talk a little bit about it today as well, since when I was an intern in 2014. So I've been with YS about 10 years. And Giselle started in group as well a few years ago and is now taken over that part of the position I was running. So she is now coordinating the Be Glad queer youth group. So all right, and again, YS, we're behavioral healthcare. We are partnered with BSD, so again, hopefully you recognize our name, and I've had good experiences with us out in schools with you as well. So we're going to cover some information today. A lot of the material and some of the research base is from GLSEN, so hopefully folks know a little bit about GLSEN, which a lot of acronyms, just like Be Glad for us, it doesn't really, and PFLAG, right? There's all sorts of acronyms. They don't really stand for the thing they originally stand for anymore. But Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network is GLSEN, and they were founded in 1990 from educators. So they've done a lot of research, and we're not going to reinvent the wheel with some of that, but we'll put that in context. So, all right. And hopefully, again, folks can follow the presentation from Teams as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about research findings about inclusive schools. We'll talk about some special considerations, some applicable skills, and give you some resources and referrals because you all can't do everything, right? You might feel like everything's up to you and that you need to know it all. And I'm here to reassure you, you can't. None of us can know everything. None of us can do everything. You can do your best and you can learn more and try other things. That's what we're here to provide a little bit more on, hopefully. But some of this is basic. I think all of you are doing some level of all of these things, and we're here to kind of reinforce that in this day and age. So, all right. I wanted to do a little raise hand poll of who in the room, maybe even online, you can do the raise hand function on Teams, who in here in your training program, so originally as part of your curriculum, had any sort of actual content about queer youth, LGBTQ plus youth, who had something they felt was yeah, that was educational. I learned something. And started going, hi. So kind of mixed, right? There was maybe 25% of people I'm seeing here in person, at least a couple hand raises there. How about a hand raise for who in the room in your career now has worked with or been in the same room as LGBTQ plus youth? Whoa, right? Oh, interesting. Yeah, not surprising. So that's a big gap, right? In terms of the education and in terms of exposure and training in the field, you don't really get that until you are out in the field. So this is just kind of emphasizing that 87% of school counselors, psychologists, social workers believe it's their responsibility to provide supportive counseling, and yet people don't really receive much of it. It's lacking. So GLSEN has done lots of research. They've identified 4 major supports. I'm going to run through those 4 major supports. Again, some things are already in your school. So again, it's reinforcing those. These 4 supports are helping to experience less harassment, discrimination, have better school climates, and prepare people better for engaging in the world after graduation, right? We're trying to launch these students into the world as fully formed human beings, hopefully. And this addresses bullying, harassment, again, that school culture, work environment to feel welcome. And this helps non-LGBTQ students as well. So it's not just about how to support a specific percentage of the population. It's really how do we make a supportive and educational area for all students. And again, make them career ready, college ready, being respectful to diversity. Our first support. This is all of you. So supportive educators. This is really focused on relationship building, things you're already doing. Hopefully we're going to get into some skills a little bit. Again, it's not rocket science, but trust, relationship building, affirmation. So you literally are saving lives already, even if you didn't know it, and you can save more, hopefully. So this is that piece of your role. Sometimes you might feel like you have a minor piece. Some of you might feel like you have too much of the piece, and some of it should be spread out a little bit more into these other resources. But some of these things are going to be advocating for students on behalf of school administration, directly implementing content in class curriculum, addressing bullying, harassment, being an advisor or organizing supportive groups at school, even just having adult allies is important. So there's a lot of research out there, Family Acceptance Project as well. Any one adult in a student's life makes an impact in terms of even just being an ally or a support, because sometimes they aren't getting that at home or in their community, or in the larger political climate at large. So there are always messages out there, whether we are hearing them or not, that kids are really keyed into, especially on social media. And sometimes those things can steer in the way of support these days, which is the benefit of social media, is there are lots of supports out there and resources, and there's still a lot of harm being done. So that's where you kind of can come in and step in and really enforce some of the boundaries around safe relationships and some visibility pieces of welcoming and safe environments. So students can actually come to school to learn and not be distracted by everything else. The second support, student-led clubs. GSAs, gender sexuality alliances, there's other names for them as well. Some people name their own. I've heard some really creative names out there before. So these are peer support. So it's not just about you, right? But you are, again, formulating some kind of structure in the environment that students can have outlets for, have peer supports, talk to each other. And this helps improve academic achievement. And again, regardless, even if they're attending, just having a GSA at the school is a visibility piece, so people know that the school environment can be supportive, or that there are allies there. I wanted to do a quick raise of hands here as well. Who has GSA things available? I know elementary schools, it's a little bit different, but in terms of middle schools and high schools, who has a GSA at your schools that you know? I know. Yeah, so like half, at least half. That's pretty good. Yeah. So this is a piece that if you don't have one at your school, how can you as supportive staff and educators really help advocate for this? If it's not, student driven, there's probably a need there, and students might not be able to do it by themselves. So we can't just kind of wait for that to happen. How do we structure that? Number three, comprehensive policies. So this has to do with your district as well as OSPI, so superintendent. And luckily, generally from what I've seen and read from OSPI, there are inclusive policies around gender and school, things around bathrooms, inclusive curriculum. There's some of those pieces that I think are going well in our state and in our districts. And the fear is rollbacks on some of those pieces too, so that are happening around the country. So I think that's a piece of having comprehensive policies and maintaining those, and how do we advocate that we need them in place. So these are things that are, preventing harassment, bullying, non-discrimination policies, having facilities be accessible for trans and gender non-conforming, non-binary students, participation in athletics, that's a big one these days too. And again, some of these are very small proportions of the populations of students you're seeing, and it's the focus of a lot of policies for some reason in terms of bans and discrimination. So this is something that impacts relatively few students, and it's very important to have that messaging out there for all students to know, because not everybody's out, or not everybody feels like it's safe to be out. So that's why it's also sometimes feels like there's only one or two folks that might be out and either complaining about this or being impacted by this, but there are others that we don't see that are also impacted by this in the rhetoric. So the last one is inclusive curriculum. Some of you may have a little bit less sway on this, but it's something to think about in your schools and in coordination with teachers and the districts, and how curriculums are kind of created and sustained, or in terms of extracurriculars as well, I'd say. But this piece really talks about, and I'm not going to read all of this necessarily, but this really focuses on representation and visibility. I kind of see this a little bit as similar to talking about suicidality, right? We are not, by asking somebody if they're suicidal, we're not going to plant that in their head that all of a sudden they're like, oh, great idea, I never thought about that. That's not how that works, right? So we need to be asking those questions, but also when we are teaching inclusive curriculum about queer history or about queer studies, it's not planting that idea in people's heads that it's a fad or something, right? And again, that is like, you can't be what you can't see. So there's a little bit of how do we do that in a way that's responsive and respective to families and to, again, not as a political stance necessarily, but some people don't want that in schools, but it's like, how do we introduce that as part of like the nature of what's happening. Even if people don't think these folks, and if they don't think we should exist in some ways, which is the harmful rhetoric, we got to stand against that and show that we have existed and will continue to exist, whether we are told to or not. It is the reality. So how do we live with that with our students live? So, all right. So I was going to talk about intersectionality.
Great. So what happens when multiple marginalized identities intersect? A lot of stress, usually. So a lot of the time, the thing that I hear the most about kids struggling with at school is feeling safe, worry about being bullied, or encountering instances of racism, homophobia, transphobia. It's really difficult to learn in an environment where you don't feel safe. In fact, there's lots of research that says it's not possible. And so it's really important just to kind of be aware that certain situations can be complicated depending on a person's identity. So some of the biggest things are, like I said, feelings of safety at school due to personal characteristics, maybe feeling like you have to appear or present in a certain way, and just preoccupation with that. Experiences of racist and anti-LGBTQ plus harassment and assault from peers. I'm sure you guys know kids are mean. Like, it's crazy. I hear about things at school and it's nuts. And I was like, gosh, have kids always been this mean? Like, yeah. There's also effects of a hostile school climate on educational well-being. Of course, it's going to affect your psychological well-being. Reporting harassment and assault to school staff, family members, and adult responses. So again, that's part of implementing those boundaries and modeling safe relationships and advocating when needed, as well as experiences with school disciplinary action. Sometimes schools don't necessarily act or maybe advocate for the child as they would like to be or feel understood. So just some awareness around that. And then, of course, school resources and supports, including student clubs, supportive educators, and inclusive curriculum, as mentioned previously. So if you have the opportunity to maybe be an advisor for a GSA, please do, because that's super important. Yeah, one very important fact, and it's probably been said before, but people of color are not monoliths. We may have similarities, however, everyone's experience is different. So it's really important not to make any assumptions. Be curious, ask, and I'll go a little bit into that on our next slide. And this is just a little bit more. These are some GLSEN resources that you can find for specific population considerations. As you can see, we have many different resources. All right, so applicable skills. So things that you can do here in the now, things that you're probably already doing. Show curiosity and empathy. Do not tolerate any sort of harassment, bullying, or slurs. Again, seeing someone advocate for you, especially in a world where it seems like very few people are, especially to see that as a teenager, as a kid, is so incredibly important and validating. So please be brave. Don't be afraid to not tolerate those things. Do your research, attend trainings like this. This is a great start. It's impossible to know everything. You're gonna mess up. Have some grace with yourselves. The language is also constantly changing. There's always changes going on. It's okay. Just ask.
There you go.
Yeah. And then Thirdly, have objects that indicate safety and honoring inclusivity. So having things like pride flags in offices, posters around school, wearing pins, artwork, support local artists. Why not? These are things that, again, kind of show like, hey, I am seen here. I am welcome here. It is safe to be here. And like I said, that matters immensely. Practice names and pronouns. Model sharing your pronouns. Normalize it. Don't make any assumptions about pronouns or even how someone might want to present or something if they're transgender. Like people don't always necessarily want to follow along the lines of a binary categorization. Advocate for inclusive school curriculum and policies. Like I said, support GSAs. It's so important for kids to have peer support. In some ways, it's even more effective than having an adult. So make it possible for that to actually exist and let there be a place for that. Also, it gives kids the opportunities to have leadership opportunities, build friendships, build community. Community is such an important protective factor. So yeah, anything that you can do to help facilitate that, why not? And then when needed, of course, refer out or make resources available. And this goes a little bit with kind of doing research on hand and maybe having things on hand if you can.
Yeah, and we've seen some of those things, again, not yet necessarily in Washington State, I think, but around the country where people are taking down signs and posters and flags and different things, right? So this is, again, visibility is under attack. So it's more important to kind of keep that presence alive and maybe double down if we can sometimes in some places or spaces. So
assert your dignity and
yeah. All right, wanted to just chat a little bit about the resources, referrals that you can share with students, and then we'll do some Q&A. So, this is a lot of stuff on a slide, so don't a lot of small print. But some of the referrals for students that we use, Pride Across the Bridge, it's a newer organization. I've met with the founder of that. They're really great. They have also organized Redmond Pride the last few years, if you've heard of that or seen that. And that's a very from within built event in terms of that, but they also have these other events going on. They have potlucks. Some of it's more focused on adults. So that's the caveat with this one, is sometimes they'll have specific things advertised for teens and specific things for adults. They've had things like self-defense classes, and then just like things that create joy for the queer community too. Trans families, which used to be under like Gender Odyssey stuff with Seattle Children's. That's had some changes in things, and they've reorganized and limited some of the groups they have. So if you go to their website, just pay attention to what they're offering now. It has changed over the last few months, unfortunately. Trevor Project is always there as well. Virtual free chat and resources. If you've never heard of the Trevor Project, it is a big thing that's been around for quite a while, so please go look at that. But they do have Trevor Space, which is chat rooms that are monitored and free crisis support, 13 to 24 years old. Lambert House is a big one too. We have at the bottom of the list here is Be Glad, the support group we've run for ages 13 and 19. So it's kind of seen as like the high school group in a way, even though again they could be in middle school, right at that 13 age. But Lambert House, really, this is all they do is groups and things for queer youth, and they are Seattle based. They're in a little bit of a new location right now temporarily. But they have a lot of different programs. They do things like Queer Prom. They do a lot of programming. We have like one specific program, and then we have like counseling in general. But that's all they do is programming for queer youth. So they have a lot of online programs. They have gaming. They have Discord servers. They've got a lot of stuff. So they're great to check out. And then there's some things through King County Library System, Queer Creative Connections, Queer Teen Book Club. Those are great. Again, a lot of these things end up being 13 plus. Some of them are if you're under 13 for some of the elementary folks. It does require parents. That you're all familiar with this in terms of our work as well, in terms of mental health, and that cutoff around 13 for consent for us as well. But and then referrals for parents, guardian supports. There are things again through PFLAG. There's a couple chapters here on the east side. Trans families again. Their groups, I think I just updated this, was their groups are the parents of elementary and middle school age. So I don't think they have any high school groups right now for at trans families. But there are other ones like Stand with Trans, that's more national, not just Eastside, not just local. And then some resources and materials, Family Acceptance Project, I mentioned earlier. They have educational booklets in English, Spanish, Mandarin, and they have one specifically for LDS community. So, and then there are some through PFLAG as well. There are some resources like book resources, faith communities that are open and affirming here on the east side as well. So those are great referrals for kind of whole person care outlook for families. There's legal services if you do have students that are dealing with harassment, bullying, and not just in the school system. There are ways to get kind of legal support through Q Law, Lavender Rights Project, even things like ACLU, Lambda Legal, and there's advocacy work with Gender Justice League, which again is local, and then with our Bellevue Police. If people feel safe to do this, I would recommend reporting hate, bias, kind of crimes on that level as well to get support. And then these are just some resources for you all as well. Welcoming Schools is a great resource for toolkits, trainings. GLSEN has a bunch of stuff. Again, if you haven't had some interactions with GLSEN, please do that, the Washington chapter. There's a GSA network that supports GSAs. So if you don't have a GSA in your school, it has a lot of toolkits and ways that students or you in the school could help facilitate that. And there's also some specific elementary school curricula. So there's not as much like GSA formation that happens in elementaries typically, but there are some supports of lesson plans and toolkits for elementary specifically here through GLSEN as well. We linked. And then the OSPI website. If you haven't checked that out, please review those policies and things that you should help be abiding by as well in your schools to stand up for some of the rights for some of the students. So, questions? We can open up some questions, and I'm gonna stop recording here. Yeah.
Okay, so I will run around if there's any questions, so that way we could use